Phil Goldstein from Fierce Wireless. In February at Mobile World Congress, I spoke with Samsung, and they downplayed any notion of tension between themselves and Google over Android. But the facts are that, I think according to Gartner in the fourth quarter, they shipped 40% of the global Android devices, and they are really the only Android OEM making any significant money off of selling Android devices. So do you think that that dynamic is a healthy one for the Android ecosystem? And what, if anything, would Google do to change that or address that?
Well, we spent lots of time with Samsung, and I can confirm you that the press coverage of, quote, tension has not been correct. We have a very, very good relationship with them. In fact, we just recently met with them in California. I've been to South Korea, and by the way, North Korea, but South Korea many times to talk to them. They have literally hundreds of millions of phones coming out on the Android platform, and the value and the profits to them are very high. So I don't think you're going to see much of a change there. Obviously, we want a competitive market, and obviously we want as many competitors as possible, and indeed Motorola is a competitor, as there are others. But the Samsung relationship has turned out to be a defining one, and I will always be appreciative of their decision very early, to be a very, very significant and make a really tough decision at the time to go with Android, which really helped define Android. So.
Is it healthy that very few phone makers, I mean, we talked about there's going to be 1 billion phones. Are people going to be making these billion and 2 billion phones in the next year? Are they going to be making money doing it?
Well, these are capitalists. And if you spend any time with South Koreans, they're very good capitalists. So I'm quite sure that all of these firms will make money. Sometimes you have to invest into the market. But if you tell me there's a billion consumer opportunity for handsets that are going to help define their world, that are so important to them, they're with them 24 hours a day, people will make money at that. They'll make money, by the way, in different ways. Not necessarily in one way.
Steve Kovac from Business Insider. Terry Myerson from Microsoft was just on stage a few minutes ago and said he wouldn't be shocked if you guys were trying to block out Facebook Home right now.
Why are you listening to Microsoft's statements about
Well,
Google?
then you came on stage and said, well, you love the openness and et cetera, but if this Facebook Home thing takes off, what's to keep you guys from removing that from the App Store and blocking it and having people sideload it instead?
Okay, so you've now constructed, using Microsoft, a scenario that's highly unlikely. Why don't you ask Microsoft some basic questions about their products and their strategy? No, ask me a question about Google, not.
I am asking you a question about
Facebook Home?
No, but I want the question phrased about Google, not on
What's
Microsoft.
to keep you guys from blocking Facebook Home from the App Store if it takes off?
It would be counter to our public statements, our policies, our religion. Anything else?
No, what do you think about
No, it's fine. I want to make sure I'm answering your question.
No, you're answering my question.
Okay, the answer is no.
The answer is no. You would not remove it from the App Store.
Okay, next question.
Great, thanks.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, what do you make? So Facebook Home, I think it surprised people just how much you can do within the existing Android framework and still use Google services.
This is called what Android is about. I said earlier, we're phenomenally happy that people are extending Android in all these ways.
So you don't look at that as anything other than a success. You're happy that
it's
they've
called
done that.
open source. Last time I checked, you can't have like half open source.
But you guys, now in fairness, you guys have rules. If you want to use Google services, there are rules about what you can and can't do. And they did a lot within the structure of what you can do.
They read the manual, they read the rules, and they adhered to them. Shocking. Okay? I'm shocked. I'm shocked that somebody could read the rules and actually implement it. Good for them. And in fact, if you look at Facebook, they actually made it a very important point to remain completely applications compatible, which shows you the power of the platform that has been built. I think it's a tremendous endorsement of Google Play and the way it works. And that's why I wanted to.
You can't get your notifications on your home screen, right?
You may speak to Facebook about that.
I think that's annoying. Okay. Go ahead.
Rolf Winkler from the Wall Street Journal. You were interviewed by Walton Kara at the 92nd Street Y a few months back, and you're talking about the four horsemen of the internet: Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and Facebook. Actually, Microsoft wasn't in there.
I think Google's in there.
I think he had Google
Excuse me. Question was, Kara, I think, asked you, if you could run one of those companies, which would it be? And you said Apple. She asked why, and you said because of the cash. And my question for you was, what would you do with that cash?
That's a long follow-up question.
Sorry.
Long delay.
Sorry, which company's cash am I spending?
Apple's. You said if you could run any of those four companies, and it wasn't Google, it would be Apple, and why you said because the huge pile of cash.
Well, I said because I've been on the board of Apple and I'm very fond of Apple, and that's why I really answered the question. I have a.
You said the cash pile.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I did answer that question. You watched it clearly. What I really think about tech companies and cash is that there's a point at which you have enough cash that you need to either start investing in that stuff or lower your prices, right? Because I mean, the tech machines are generating a lot of cash. And so to me, all this cash piling up on all these tech companies, and if you look, by the way, every one of them is piling up lots and lots of cash. That's a missed opportunity for investment. In Apple's case, I think I'd have to be there to really sort of understand. But there's plenty of ways to soak up one's cash besides giving it out to your shareholders.
Specific investment recommendations for Apple?
No, I think I'll focus on Google. Thank you.
How are things with Apple? I mean, you were on the board, then, obviously you guys got more competitive and left. Is there more dialogue these days?
Oh, well, of course. Well, first place, remember, Apple and Google have a big partnership on search, right? There's lots of money being made between the two companies on search. And with the mobile explosion that's occurred, we've seen, tremendous success with that. With Maps, of course, we basically sort of told them, we really like you to use Maps. They decided not to. We told them we really like to use Maps. We would really like them to still use our Maps.
And you guys built, I mean, I think, we talked about it, like, one of the consequences of Apple, doing their own maps is we finally got the Google Maps, I think, as iOS users that we wanted. We got the turn-by-turn. We got all the things that we wanted. Why did Apple have to do their own maps for us to get the Google Maps that we wanted in the first place?
I think you'll need to ask Apple that question. But from our perspective, we really want them to use our maps with all those directions and so forth and so on. And we're happy that you now have that as an app. So it would be easier for them to take the app that's in the store and put it as their basic one.
So,
Go over here. Go ahead.
so first I'd like to say, it's Jaffer Haydar from Synacor. First I'd like to say thank you for everything that Google has done to change the world and continue to innovate, even at the scale and size that you guys are. I'm going to ask a Google question. Could you share your thoughts on the connected home, Google TV, and really the connected home and that experience?
Andy Rubin, a year ago, sort of started talking about the vision of Android as a platform that was more than just mobile phones. And of course, we've been talking about phones, but Android is now showing up everywhere, in printers and televisions and things like that, maybe eventually lots of other consumer devices. So the sort of core idea is think about peerwise self-configuring. So what you really want is when the device comes into a local network, you want it to self-configure. You don't want to be sitting there saying, oh, I'm joining this network and this is what it does and so forth. And so the classic example is you walk into your room and because it's sort of your normal behavior, it realizes that you want your text messages on your phone to show up on the television or not, depending on with your other people and so forth and so on. And we can do all of that now. So Android is powerful enough and there's enough sensing information that we can have very sort of useful next generation connected devices. And the principle that I'm describing, which is sort of automatic self-configuring, is something that can occur with sort of any device, any of the consumer or CPU-based devices. And almost everything we use now has a computer in it of some kind. We're never more than 6 inches from an integrated circuit, as you know. And a reasonable expectation is a lot of them will use versions of Android. A lot of the versions that I'm describing will not be full Android. In other words, they're not going to be able to run the App Store and so forth. They're going to have enough computation that they've got a networking stack and they've got some way to display an output.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, Eric. Lance Ulanoff, Mashable. In the aftermath of the Boston bombing, you guys launched the Person Finder, and you were widely praised for it. And I started to think that the only way in which something like that can work is using Google's signals, which are very important for search and everything that you know about us. So obviously, you guys also suffer from a lot of criticism for those same things. And I feel like you are held up to a double standard, that Google is praised when it does something with the tools it has at hand, and then day to day, everybody says you're invading our privacy and you're trying to steal our information. So what does it take to change that perception? What is this, as you keep saying in your talk here, this is human nature, or is there at some point people realize or don't realize Google's true nature?
Well, thank you for the question and the compliment. If you look at privacy, people have a lot of concerns about privacy. And there are a lot of examples of companies that have violated people's privacy. They also feel that they're exposed online for whatever reason. So I think that the criticisms are well intended. And the best answer that I can come up with is to say what we do and why we do it. And I'm not sure how to answer it beyond that. I don't think that privacy concerns are going to go away. I think they're going to continue. And the best thing that we can do is say, look, it's a shared thing about privacy. You have to know what you're doing. We have to be very careful about security. And we have to be very clear as to what we're doing and why we're doing it. And it has to make sense at some basic level. And it's easy to just say, make this up or that up, but the fact of the matter is this is how the system works. I'm much more concerned not about companies like Google, but rogue third-party companies that come in and do things which really upset the perception of the industry as a whole. The well-run companies, right, which I include most of the leaders here, actually do have legal teams, PR teams. They spend a lot of time thinking about these things, and we can debate their decisions, but the fact of the matter is they're thought through, they're regulated, they're trying very hard to be legal and so forth and so on. But you can imagine lots of other companies, right, that come in and sort of misuse this information and create a bad thing for everybody. Ultimately, in industries, they sort this out as they mature, and we're still changing so quickly, and these devices are so very empowering that it's early still.
Hi, Tim Letcher from Cole McVoy. With all the advances that Google has made in technology, and you mentioned Moore's Law with advances in basically computer power, what can you do? What is Google making any efforts in basically the other part of our phone, which is the battery and the energy? And are they investing in anything or investigating, developing?
We don't have anything specific in that aside for some investments. I know that our partners that are making phones are spending a lot of time on battery life. The simplest way you do this is you use less signal. So for example, in Android, not only does it allow you to shut down parts of it, but it will also show you how much bandwidth you're using and so forth, and the operators like that. So being more clever about the scarce resource that is power on your phone is the primary reason why we're getting sort of longer batteries. The new generation of chips, especially the ARM chips, and then the new generation of Intel chips, are designed very much to be battery efficient for that reason. So that's sort of the state of it. There are lots and lots of venture firms that are working on new variants of lithium batteries. And there are, last time I counted, roughly 10 different variants of lithium, none of which I understood, each of which has different potential and different properties, but it's a slow cycle. It's very different from our world. And I should mention, by the way, on Moore's Law, that there's a lot of people who've been looking at how much longer Moore's Law will continue. There's a National Research Council report that went into this in great detail. And the consensus is that we're sort of on the ending of that period, although it's not ended yet. But that at some point, some number of years from now, this amazing engine that's been driving all of this will in fact slow down. And there are technical reasons for that, mostly involving power and heat, not as much transistor density.
You mentioned that Android is going, to this next, billion devices in a very short time frame. I think it's a great time to look, and I'm sure you guys do all the time. What do you think Android has done really well, and where are the biggest opportunities for you guys? What more can these devices do that they don't do today?
Well, the story will be what the apps do. So think of it as a platform. And as a platform, the platform's pretty complete now. I mean, you can pretty much do amazing apps on these devices. And so we talked a little bit about the self-configuring nature and those sorts of things, and I think that's going to come just naturally as extensions of the platform. But aside from that, it's going to be apps. And these are both HTML5 apps wrapped up, as well as native Java apps. And again, I think that's the fact of the matter is if you go to startups today, they're developing for Android and iPhone, right? 2 different operating systems, 2 different languages, and then they have back-end services which are running on some form of cloud model.
And what about the physical device? How likely do you think it is? I mean, today we've pretty much evolved to a thin, big screen, slab of glass. Is that the end state, or do you think a couple of years from now, breakthroughs, flexible displays or something, will the phone look really different a few years from now?
There are many people working on new kinds of hardware there. We evolved to this sort of thin glass plate because the primary cost driver, battery driver, so forth, was in fact that screen. And there's a lot of evidence. People love these high screens. The screens are getting to the point where the visual density is essentially perfect from an eye perspective. So beyond that, I'm not sure what else we can do. More flexible, different forms, different shapes, and so forth. So we'll see that, and then we'll obviously see lots of wearable computing. And there's been lots of research in the last decade of what would wearable computing look like. Google Glass came out of that research, and there will be other kinds of things.
Do you think we want to watch? Because there's been a lot of talk about that.
Well, many people stopped wearing watches because they had their phones. So now the question is, will the watch be powerful enough that you won't be using your phone all the time? The insight that I would offer is that with Google Glass and the ability to speak to it, you'll probably be able to speak to your, it's the Dick Tracy watch. You can speak to it too.
Last
Hi,
question.
Paul Lindbergh, Mayo Clinic, Rochester, Minnesota. There's all sorts of things happening in healthcare, as we're all aware. Interesting things going on. I was intrigued by your comments about remote monitoring. Where do you see those partnership opportunities? What do you think, who are the key players that need to be involved in those conversations, and how can we make that happen?
Most of the focus on health IT, which I know Mayo has a lot going on in, has been around cost reduction, billing, systematizing medical treatment, and so forth within the hospital system and then the outpatient sequence. And that work is going to continue. For people like myself, that looks like an IT problem. Big computers, lots of data, highly regulated through HIPAA, those sorts of things. There's a much larger explosion that's going to be happening, which is on this medical device monitoring, using transdermal patches, other things which are non-invasive, that you wear, you ingest, you paint on yourself, and so forth, which then speak to the phone. There are many, many manufacturers that are making small dongles that you can plug into the phone that have specialized medical receivers or stuff that they actually just literally plug into the USB port on the phone, and off you go. The phone then becomes the staging area for that information, for real-time information both ways. So, real-time monitoring of your heart, there are all sorts of examples like this coming. And this will happen very fast because it's an area of relatively less regulation. It's more sort of a consumer add-on. Also, the market does not typically require a prescription, so people can just go buy the things, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, well, thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you all.
Thanks.